Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting, if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. Luna's Resurgence. Episode 6. Chapter 29-34. Nick POV. Nick had returned to his office with the book in his hand. It was just after 3 p.m. He'd already read 2 chapters. This was definitely written with a woman in mind, a woman using it. He was currently alone in his office, due to both Brady and Kevin having vanished after he'd glared furiously at them, for having replaced his leather desk chair with a kiddie high chair. Clearly, Jeremy had already sent them the photo of him at Bella's house, sitting in that ridiculously tiny chair. He had not yet seen the photo himself, but could well imagine how it looked. His chair had been rolled into his office a few minutes later, by one of them. He didn't know which one, but could clearly hear the 3 of them laughing hysterically, and running away from his office. They were lucky he had something else important to do, or he'd have them out on the training grounds for hand-to-hand combat with him. He'd literally be kicking their asses. Might still do it yet. The day was not over. If that picture surfaced anywhere in this pack house, or his pack for that matter, they would all be pounded into the ground. He was sitting on the couch by the unlit fireplace when he was mind-linked, an uncertain quality to the male voice that came down the link. Alpha. I think your mate just went off into rogue territory. Nick shot to his feet. The book was tossed onto the coffee table. Where exactly? He shot right back. His annoyance could be heard. Patrol Section 3 Alpha. On my way, he snapped, and he was already heading out of his office. What was she thinking? He'd already told her she wasn't allowed to go patrolling. He'd not even showed her where the pack borders were yet. She had clearly taken it upon herself to go find them. Rogues about? No, Alpha. But was carrying a bow and quiver. What? His annoyance rose right to anger now. Was she so stubborn as to run off and not even know where she was going? He was not going to stand for it. The stubborn woman would submit to him today, whether she wanted to or not. He was already sprinting for the border. It was a good 40-minute run at top speed even for him. Rip could get there faster, but Nick didn't want to be standing there arguing with her while naked in front of everyone. There was going to be yelling. That was a certainty. He mind-linked his Alpha unit to get their asses out there right now as well. They all replied with a yes, and he knew they would be. Nick had not been with her all day and had no way of knowing if something had set her off, or if she thought because he was out or busy, she'd have the opportunity to get away from him. She had unpacked yesterday and he'd thought this morning had gone well. But if she had her bow with her, it was possible she was on the run. She would not leave that behind, or he seriously doubted it. Nick thought things between them were progressing, but now she goes and does this. There had better be a good explanation as to what she was doing out in rogue territory. If her goal was to tick him off. Goal achieved. He hit the border and scanned the area. Jeremy was next to him in less than a minute, doing the same. There was no sign of her. He turned his eyes to movement in the distance out in rogue territory and saw his border patrol was out in rogue territory also, not on the border where he was supposed to be. Where? He shot at the man down the link. He saw the man point out further northwest of where he was standing over there. Alpha. His voice was tinged with fear. He clearly did not want to be the one passing on the message. Nick didn't blame him. Nick was off. There was nothing out to the northwest but a large wetlands area. He saw a bunch of ducks fly up into the air and then an arrow fly up after them, took down one and shook his head. It could only be one of hers. No one else would be stupid enough to be out here with a bow and arrow. His border patrol headed back now that he and Jeremy were here to collect her. At least the man had stayed with her. Though he had left his section of the border unpatrolled and unguarded for goddess only knew how long. He was not happy about that. If something got through and pack members were injured, it would be her fault. Calm down, Nick. Jeremy told him, she's not running away. I don't give a damn. Nearly half a kilometer into rogue territory he shot back, still angry. He found her thigh deep, out in the water of the wetlands, collecting the duck she had shot down, noted there were a few more by the edge of the water. What are you doing? He roared at her, all his anger showing. Lucinda turned and looked at him, her eyes a little wide. Clearly she had not been expecting to see him or have him be angry with her. He watched as she removed her arrow from the duck, and rinsed it in the water, reached back and put it in her quiver. Seemed not in the slightest bit concerned that they were about to have a full-blown argument. It should be very clear he was pd off. He would not stand for this type of behavior, not even from his mate. Hunting, she finally answered him. A simple statement. Her eyes moved the duck in her hand and then back to him as if to imply it was obvious what she was doing. Get out now, he snapped. Do you even know you're in rogue territory? She had the audacity to laugh at him. She might not know where the border was exactly, but rogue territory had a distinct feeling to it. So, yes, she would have known the minute she'd crossed into it. Yes, she stated calmly, but this is where my prey is. I don't care. It's reckless, and I told you this morning about being out here. She walked towards him, seemingly unfazed by his anger. Tossed the duck onto the pile she had by the water. Actually, you told me I wasn't allowed to patrol, and I am not. His hand landed on her upper arm the minute she was within reach. You know well what it meant. Directly disobeyed my order. He pulled her away from the water and back towards the pack border. She was digging in her heels and trying to stop him. He could feel her resistance. But this fight would continue in the safety of pack territory. He felt the crack to his left knee, sharp and painful, stumbled as it collapsed under him, and he found himself kneeling on the ground, pain coursing through his knee. The second hit to his lower back whipped his head around. Lucinda had struck him with her bow, twice now. The second hit made him let go of her. Nick's eyes were on her now. Oh, he was more than angry, even Rip let out a low snarl. She might be their mate, but she had just attacked him. She was walking away from him, backing away at that. Her bow was aimed at him and he watched as she notched an arrow and sized him up. You don't want to do that, he stated as he pulled himself up from the ground and turned to face her. That first hit to his knee had been ferocious and it still hurt, likely left a bruise. It definitely broke the skin, it was stinging like crazy. But that would not stop him from using all of Rip's speed to tackle the woman to the ground. She wasn't headed back to the wetlands, he noted, but had moved off to the south of him. He took a step towards her and froze. Saw her eyes move beyond him. She stepped to her left to look past him. The scent hit him as she adjusted her aim. Rogues. This was the very reason she wasn't allowed to be out here. The arrow shot past him and he heard the animal snarl. He turned to see a large mangy beast that had come out of the reeds further north of him. It had an arrow dead center to its chest. It was falling to the ground dead. But it was the other two that were stalking out of the reeds that had his undivided attention. Rip snarled loudly and aggressively, as did Jeremy's wolf cow. Get her out of here, he shot at Jeremy. I'll fight, boss, she's got that bow, she'll be all right behind us. Nick didn't much like it, but let it go. He was between her and the two rogues, so would be safe. neither of them would get past him or Jeremy. He was certain of that. These two rogues were in human form and had many open wounds and sores. They had been rogues a long time, he guessed, as he stood and waited to see whether they would back off or stay and fight. It was a standoff right this minute, but Nick could clearly see it was her they wanted. Both of their eyes kept moving from him and Jeremy to her. A female to mate with. That was what they wanted. Not with his mate. Another arrow shot by him and he knew Lucinda would kill them all without hesitation with that bow of hers. He set off to get the third one and it bolted off back into the reeds of the wetlands. He didn't give chase. He could hear with his alpha hearing that it was leaving. Nick turned to look at her, she lowered her bow. "Get those arrows while you're over there," she yelled out to him, like this was nothing at all to be concerned about. He watched her walk over to the wetlands and pick up the half a dozen dead ducks and then just turn and walk off towards pack territory. He yanked the two arrows out of the dead rogues and stalked off after her. "Calm down, Nick. She's fine, she's safe," he heard Jeremy through the mind link. "Oh, I'll give her fine," he practically snarled as he stalked after her. He was not only unimpressed by her attitude, but also her lack of following his request. It wasn't unreasonable to ask her to stay inside the pack's borders. Then to have attacked him with that bow of hers, was not on. He was the alpha. Her alpha and she would not disrespect him. Any other person in this pack would have been put in their place by now. Attacking him like that was not on. A beating and being hauled off to the cells until he decided if he'd banish them or not, is what they would be in for. Chained with silver and shot up with wolfsbane for good measure, a part of their punishment. Nick's strides outmatched her easily and he was on her in less than a minute. Grabbed onto her arm again. "You hit me with that bow again. I'll snap it in half," he snarled at her and stalked off knowing he was dragging her this time. Didn't well care to be honest. When she turned on him and kicked him in the chest, he stopped walking and stared right down at her. Anger was rolling off of him. It was there for her to see, for all to see, in fact. Nick yanked her up from the ground, easy to do, she was so small and light, and tossed her over his shoulder. She yelled at him and hit him with her fists. He ignored her. Nick knew she'd lost all her arrows when he'd upended her. Her whole top half was dangling down his back. She was bent over his shoulder at her hips. "Get those arrows," he shot at Kevin, who was standing watching with Brady. They had probably been here the whole time but had not interfered, knew it was not their place, that Nick would only turn his anger on them as well. Nick stalked all the way to the training ground. He'd sprinted through it on the way to Sector 3 and had seen her bow case sitting by the fence next to the training ground. Nick dumped her on her ass and glared down at her. She'd stopped hitting him some time back when she'd realized it was not of any use. "Pack it away or I will," he grated out between clenched teeth. He watched her get up, after glaring back at him, took her arrows from Kevin and stalked off to pack them all away. Nick did note how she turned the open case away from him. Like he cared what it looked like inside right that minute. The minute it was shut and the locks latched, he yanked it right out of her hand and stalked off towards his office. The growl it evoked from her, he just ignored. "Give it back," she yelled at him angrily. Nick ignored her angry yelling. If she wanted it back she could well earn it back. It was his now. It would stay his, kept in his office for the time being. It would be her punishment, for not only disobeying him but outright disrespecting him in front of his unit and border patrol. He went right to his office and she was stalking after him. Nick knew she would. This was her weapon and, according to Kevin, didn't like people touching it, not even the case. So if he had it, she would follow. Nick walked over to his wall safe and used his fingerprint to access it, put the case inside and snapped the safe shut before she could get it. He'd snapped his hand out and stopped her from getting to it as she'd yelled at him, "Don't you dare!" Nick turned to face her now. She was as angry as he was, it seemed. "Punishment," he snapped, "till you learn to follow a simple order. It's not that hard. You didn't say I couldn't go hunting. Just couldn't patrol," she screamed at him. "Why are you not allowed to patrol?" he demanded. He knew she understood why and had blatantly disregarded everything he'd told her that morning. When she just stood there glaring at him, and what just happened? "If I hadn't come along. If the border patrol had not seen you leave, 3 rogues, Lucinda, were out there hunting you. I would have killed them, Kyra would have," she snapped right back at him. "Not the point, and you know it," he snarled, pointing a finger at her. "You're not to leave the territory unless initiated into the pack. That was the rule and you know it." She just stood there glaring at him, because she did know it. Had outright ignored it and couldn't deny it. After a full minute of silence, he'd had enough. "If you want to be like this, let's initiate you right now then." "You will?" "Oh, it's going to happen, Lucinda. What's the difference between now and a few days? I was going to give you time to come to terms with it. But your blatant disregard and disrespect forces my hand." He snapped his hand out and grabbed her wrist, reached over and picked up the pack's ceremonial blade that sat on his desk in a holder and sliced down her palm. Flipped the blade over one-handed and turned the blade on himself, cutting his own palm. Lucinda was pulling at his hand now, trying to get out of his grip. It was no use, he would not be letting go until she submitted to him and accepted him as her alpha. Nick pressed his palm to hers and laced his fingers through hers the moment they instinctively opened for the initiation process and held on tight, his blood merging with hers. Lucinda screamed up at him to let go. Nick stood his ground. His decision was made. He would wait and she would have to accept it, or he would forcibly bleed her into his pack. His anger at the situation she'd put herself into was too much. He could not physically hurt her, and this was the only logical way to know where she was or be able to contact and track her at will. Rip was unhappy with the current situation but was not actively fighting him about it. His mate had attacked and disrespected him too. He could feel her resistance, so very strong. She was staring him down, refusing to say a single word. He knew forcibly being bled into a pack hurt. She was already feeling it, he could see it. As stubborn as she was only causing herself pain. It wasn't hurting him, just her. If she just accepted it, it wouldn't be so bad. Her clear defiance on the subject to him showed him she was going to fight him to the bitter end about it. Well, this was one battle she would not win. Nick would know where she was from now on at all times. Nick felt her buckle under the pain, and watched her fall to her knees. Tears were brimming in her eyes. He was winning, unfortunately. She was kneeling before him, he had her hand in a vice-like grip and was not letting go. He hunkered down in front of her. "Just accept it, Lucinda. It won't hurt that way," he urged her softly. "You don't know what you're doing," she bit out, tears spilling down her face. She wouldn't look at him though. "Yes, I do. You will be a member of this pack when we're done here. You're a BD. You have no idea," she suddenly sobbed. Nick caught her as she finally passed out from the pain of being forcibly bled into his pack. He felt the moment the connection was made. Sighed and shook his head. She'd fought it to the very last. Not many passed out, most gave in and accepted well before then. Accepted it and the pain died off instantly, but no, not his mate. He let go once the bond to his pack and himself was established, watched the wound on her hand and his heel over. It had stayed open the entire time due to the speciality of the blade used. Nick picked up her unconscious body and walked out of his office with her, up to their suite, and had Samantha come to undress, wash and change her into sleepwear. She would likely be out all night. Being forcibly bled into a pack was not fun, and it took its toll on both the human and wolf. She was going to be upset with him, but would get over it in a day or two. You hope? Rip snarled at him, unhappy obviously. 30. Lucinda POV hunting ducks was much better practice. Lucinda was tracking a flock. Knew that she'd crossed out of pack territory, but wasn't overly concerned. She was just honing her skills, and duck would be nice for dinner. She'd seen the border patrol, nodded to him and continued to track her prey. She watched as they settled into the wetlands and started taking them out one at a time. The angry roar from behind her as she was collecting her downed prey made her turn. It could only be Nick. Yelling like that at her, she was a little surprised to see him. Thought he was busy this afternoon, got the impression he'd be off pack territory. She pulled the arrow out of the duck, rinsed it in the water and dropped it into her quiver. Hunting, she informed him, thought that it should have been obvious he was standing next to her pile of dead ducks. Was he blind? Did she know she was in rogue territory? Yes, she wasn't stupid, and she was border patrol back at the Half Moon Pack. She knew how to tell the difference between pack and rogue territory. There was a very distinct difference. You could actually feel it when you crossed the line. All your primal instincts kicked in. Kyra was on alert instantly, and the smell was very different as well. Nick's pack had this pine needle smell, quite nice, probably why his scent was mixed with it as well. Rogue territory kind of smelled old and musty, out here a bit like rotten wood too. Likely because of the surrounding wetlands. The minute she was within his reach, Nick had grabbed onto her and started dragging her away. Oh no, I'm not standing for this again, she thought, angry at him now. She had been willing to go back with him right this minute. But dragging her again, and his hand was gripping her so tightly it was hurting her. He would know it too. She turned her bow over in her hand and slammed the side edge of it right into the back of his left knee. It was not just a hunting weapon, she had used it on more than one occasion to defend herself. The minute he was down on one knee, and Lucinda knew that he would be, she'd hit him with the full force of her strength on the edged side. If it had hit the front of his knee, she would have kneecapped him and dislocated that knee. She flipped the bow over a little and swung again. The BD was going to let go. She saw Jeremy running towards her, a worried look on his face. Smashed the bow into the small of his back as hard as she could. Oh, if you want a fight you'll get one, she thought as she backed away from him. Grabbed an arrow and notched it. They weren't her silver-tipped arrows. So he'd likely just pull them out and toss them aside. Lucinda was not out to kill him, he was her mate. It would destroy her to do that, but a warning shot, if needed, would happen. You don't want to do that. His voice was flat and devoid of all emotions. Willing to take her on, and she knew it. He got up slowly from the ground, just staring at her. His intent was clear, she was going to do as he wanted or he was going to make her. Movement over his right shoulder caught her attention, the tall reeds on the edge of the wetlands parted and a rogue wolf emerged. She stepped to her left to sight past him better, and took aim, letting the arrow fly with the full power of her bow. It would have to sink deep, with no silver tip to aid in the killing of the beast. It sailed past Nick only, a half a foot from his face. His head turned and looked at the creature. There were two more coming from the reeds. Lucinda notched another arrow without hesitation, heard Nick snarl a very loud, aggressive warning at them. Useless, she thought, and let fly her second arrow and was reaching for the third when he finally acted against the creatures. Why he waited, she didn't know. Just rogues and mangy, wounded and infected ones at that. Just put them out of their misery already. She saw it dart off back into the reeds, to get away from him. Lucinda frowned when he didn't even go after it. She and Kyra wouldn't leave it out here. Hunt and kill it they would. He had a different view. She was annoyed, him letting it get away. Wasn't it his job to do just that? Hunt and kill. Get those arrows while you're over there, she yelled out. He might as well make himself useful. She turned to go and get her ducks. She would give them to the head chef of the pack's kitchen to prepare them. Something different from the usual menu, she supposed. Lucinda felt his hand clamp around her arm again. Did the man not get the message the first time? Her eyes turned on him angrily. You hit me with that bow again. I'll snap it in half, he snarled at her and continued to drag her off towards the pack. Lucinda actually did believe he would do it, probably had the strength to do it as well if his wolf helped him, so she used her combat skills instead and launched a roundhouse kick towards him. It landed exactly where she wanted it to. Right in the middle of his chest. He didn't even flinch. Just stared at her, even more angry it seemed. Then all of a sudden she was yanked up off the ground, as if she weighed nothing, and thrown over his shoulder. She watched all her arrows spill onto the ground out of her quiver. Lucinda yelled and kicked and hit him to stop and retrieve them. He ordered someone to pick them up. She continued to beat him as hard as she could on his back. Kyra was of no use to her, she'd retreated and would not harm her mate. Had been happy all day over his wolf purring at her, annoying not having Kyra's strength. She was no match for this big BD. She gave up trying to get him to put her down. It was clear he was not going to, until he was good and ready to do so. Why he was even that mad at her she didn't know. He should be thanking her for getting fresh duck for dinner, not to mention she'd been there to take down 2 rogues to his 0. She was better and quicker to act. She was unceremoniously dumped onto her ass. Had been hard-pressed for time to protect her bow, she only just saved it from getting damaged and glared up at him for it. Pack it or I will, he'd grated out at her, still angry, she could see. Lucinda turned her case away from them, unlocked it, and packed her bow away, after checking it over for damage. Kevin handed her the spilled arrows. She'd nodded to him her thanks for collecting them. She had been carried all the way back and his whole alpha unit were trailing them. She'd seen the way they were all looking at her. Once she'd stopped fighting him, Kevin had shook his head at her. Brady just watched her with no expression. But Jeremy seemed to find it amusing. Lucinda had flipped him off and poked her tongue out at him. The 3 of them had nearly laughed, but had held it in. Probably didn't want to incur their alpha's wrath. The minute her case was closed and locked, it was ripped right out of her hands by Nick. She was not expecting it at all. He strode off with it. Give it back, she'd yelled at him, astounded that he would take it from her. Everyone knew better. She stalked after him. Guess he didn't know that. He'd never asked her about her bow and she'd not offered anything up either. To her horror, she watched him lock it in his alpha safe. She had launched herself at him, trying to get to it before the door closed and sealed. She'd seen him use his fingerprint to access it. It was not coming out of there unless he agreed to it. Nick had held her back with one of his impossibly long arms. Punishment, till you learn how to follow a simple order, it's not that hard, he'd snapped at her. Lucinda had argued with him instantly. He'd only told her she couldn't patrol, not go hunting or training. In fact, she distinctly recalled him telling her everyone here trains. His swearing at her made her frown, not the point, and you know it. She'd known what he was mad about. She had disobeyed him in a roundabout way, but Kyra and her were more than capable and she had been fully armed as well. Lucinda was glaring at him, Nick was treating her like a child who couldn't protect herself. He knew she could, had seen from himself that Kyra was more than capable of handling a few rogues, and Lucinda herself had nearly taken his head off. She was more than capable, as well, of protecting herself. Kyra would never allow anyone to harm her either. Take full control and unleash all her wolf power and strength. If you want to be like this, let's initiate you right now then. You will, she shot back at him. She wasn't going to do that until she was good and ready. Oh. It's going to happen, Lucinda. What's the difference between now and a few days? I was going to give you time to come to terms with it. But your blatant disregard and disrespect forces my hand. Nick was much faster than she expected and had her wrist tightly in his hand. Her palm was cut a second later, her eyes widened. He was really going to do it. To force her into his pack, she pulled with everything she had to get away from him. From what she knew was coming, his palm was pressed to hers the minute his was cut. Her hand instinctively opened for the initiation rite and his fingers laced with hers to hold hers to his. She felt his blood merge with hers and screamed at him to let go, but he would not. No matter how hard she pulled at her hand, he wasn't letting go. Lucinda stopped physically fighting him and focused every ounce of her mental strength and willpower on fighting the connection that he was forcing on her. She would not utter the words he wanted her to say, she would not renounce the half-moon pack. She would not renounce her baby sisters, not for him, not like this. He had no idea what he was doing to her. Her eyes locked on him, he was going to get a fight. She would not back down. Pain was coursing through her hand, and not from the grip he had on her, but from him forcing his pack onto her, to try and force her to submit to him. That pain was working its way up her arm and starting to spread through the rest of her body. The longer he held on, the more she denied him, the more pain spread through her body. Kyra was whining in her mind, curled up in a tight circle in pain as well, knowing it wasn't one she could win either. It was her mate's blood and she didn't want to fight him. If you accept it, it won't be so bad, he told her. I will not give in to you, she thought, tears of pain burning her eyes, completely buckled under the force he was pushing through the joined hands, using his alpha aura against her, trying to make her submit to him. She fell onto her knees, unable to stand anymore. The pain and his aura were too much on her at the same time. Still he didn't release her. He had no idea what he was making her lose. Just accept it, Lucinda. It won't hurt that way, he told her. His voice was soft, he wanted her to submit to him. You don't know what you're doing, she bit out, her tears spilling down her face. She closed her eyes. Could see their beautiful little faces looking right at her, her last defense against him and his trying to force her into his pack. The tether to them was killing her, it was ripping at her insides. Yes, I do, you will be a member of this pack when we're done here. But he didn't know, she was losing her connection to them, to her beautiful baby sisters. He had no idea that she wasn't blood related to them and that what he was doing would completely sever her from them. It was too much. The pain was now tearing into her very heart. You're a BD. You have no idea, she sobbed, unable to hold it in anymore. She would not forgive him. She held their image in her mind's eyes as long as she could, tears pouring from her as she held on to them, as tightly as she could. She could feel it, her bond to them, peeling away one excruciating layer at a time. Felt like her heart was being pulled right out of her chest, slowly, agonizingly, while she was awake and got feel it all. Till that final snap came, so harsh and blinding with pain that darkness claimed her and the blessed oblivion of unconsciousness. 31. Nick POV. Even though Lucinda was upstairs and unconscious in their suite, he could now at least feel her. Tugging on that tether that he'd solidified, the minute she'd passed out and was unable to fight it anymore. Made him relax a little. Seeing the stubborn way she'd fought against him, it had shocked him, that it had gone to the extreme of her fighting till she passed out completely. Why she had to fight so darn hard, against him at every turn, confused him. He wanted to be with her. What was so wrong with him that she didn't want their bond to work out? One insult, surely wasn't worth this much resistance. If she only knew how hard he was trying to learn everything about Luna's and to make sure she would have the position, title, and respect she deserved, perhaps it would help. He was going to have to sit her down and talk to her. It would be humiliating to say the least. But maybe, it would help her to come around and give him some leeway. Kevin had been unimpressed by Nick's bleeding Lucinda into the pack as he'd done. Had left the Alpha office and not returned at all. Brady was sitting reading a book on Luna's. He'd actually not said a thing about it at all. Jeremy, on the other hand, had told him exactly how he'd felt about it. His opinion, he would state, whether Nick wanted to hear it or not. That is not going to help your mating alliance. There was no clause that said, I couldn't. Nick had shot back. He was still mad that Lucinda had disobeyed him and Jeremy was copping the brunt of it. Regardless, Nick. If you think Lucinda is going to wake up and smile at you tomorrow, I think you are dead wrong. It was not how I planned on it, Jeremy. You know I was going to give her time to agree. But today, after I told her not to, she goes and does the opposite. What did she think was going to happen? I am not Alpha Corey, who isn't going to punish her. All I did, was bring it forward a few days. Against her will, Nick. Granny would beat you senseless. Well, Granny is not here. He shot a warning look at Jeremy. Well, Nick, if you need her help again, she'll want to know why. Jeremy shrugged, and no amount of rum will save your ass from the beating she'll land on you, for this one. It's not like she wouldn't have been initiated anyway. It's the respect thing. Granny will beat you over. He'd sighed and left the office, not returned either. Nick was leaning back in his chair, a mountain of paperwork on his desk. He really should start on it. Just couldn't seem to find the energy or have the inclination, for that matter, to attend to it. I think, boss, Brady's voice broke into Nick's thoughts, you did the right thing. I think both Jeremy and Kevin agree too. Just have never seen you do it before. Kind of reminds them of your father probably is all. And then he had strolled out of the office and not returned. Nick was left alone with his own thoughts. Well, at least one of his men understood his actions. He wasn't like his father or his brothers, and would never be. This was the only time he would force her to do something against her will. He'd only done it for her own good. At least now she could call for backup or help, if needed to, and they could talk anytime without having to be standing next to each other. He could ask her to lunch or dinner, find out what she was up to too, and her emotions would come down the link. So he'd have some idea of her mood and emotions, especially when he played with her. She had to understand his point of view and the reason behind what he'd done. She would come around, just might push their mating bond a few days back. He probably had to start all over again, but he was willing to do that for her. Samantha appeared in his office, brought him coffee and sat down in front of him. What did you do to her? Bled her into the pack is all. She'll be fine. Samantha sat staring at him for a long time. Why didn't she agree to it? I don't know. Resisted with all she had, he sighed. Nick honestly had no idea why she was so resistant to it. Perhaps, Nicholas, you should have asked her to explain to you why she didn't want to. Sometimes, things are more complicated than anyone realizes. Samantha, she left the pack and went out into rogue territory, and not just a little way, he offered by way of explanation. She was again quiet for a while. Would that be something she'd normally do in her old pack? Perhaps she is used to doing this type of thing. I told her no border patrol or fighting rogues unless initiated first. Samantha, she disregarded it completely. Nick thought it was curious that Samantha had made her way into his office, which was not like her at all. Jeremy must have told her what had happened that afternoon, maybe even asked her to come and talk to him about it. Still there has to be a reason. Nicholas. Who was her previous mate and what was his rank? I don't know, he answered, and he didn't. She wasn't willing to talk about it. She wouldn't talk to me about him. Apparently, that is her business and not mine. Nick didn't like not knowing, but he couldn't force the woman to tell him. So he would know only when she was willing to talk to him. Samantha was looking at him with a raised eyebrow. What? Nothing, she shrugged. Guess she talked to me, more than you. She stood and turned to leave. Wait. Nick sighed. Great, she'd talk to anyone but him, it seemed. How much do you know? That he died when she was just 18. She nodded and walked out of his office. Nick frowned now. Died when she was 18. Both her parents had died when she was 18 too. From what little he had gleaned from her in a house fire. He frowned. Alpha Corey had said no one would talk about it. But really it didn't sound that bad. Apparently she'd either not been home at the time or had gotten out and with her twin sisters. Traumatized by the event. He guessed losing all of them at once would be painful. Something else was nagging at him though. It couldn't be that simple. If no one was allowed to talk about it, under her previous Alpha's orders with threat of punishment. Nick sat there tapping his pen on his desk, trying to make sense of it. Nothing added up. He was missing something. Something vital and likely big. Jeremy, anything about that Darwin fellow? No, boss, and the link was severed. Nick frowned. That man surely couldn't still be mad. Nothing ticked him off for long. Jeremy. Busy, boss, girl, you know, and the link was severed again. Nick glanced at the time. It was after 7. He'd not eaten dinner, wasn't even hungry. His men were all off doing their own thing, it seemed. He was on his own for the rest of the night. Nick turned to the stack of papers awaiting his attention and made himself start working on them. He'd been preoccupied with his mate for days now. It was time to get things back to normal, and he got back to working as usual. 32. Lucinda POV. Waking up, Lucinda could feel Nick's arm around her waist. Everything from yesterday afternoon flooded her mind, and anger boiled her blood instantly. How could this man possibly think she was willing to have him hold her, or be in this bed with him like this? Welcome to my pack, my dear. His voice practically purred down the mind link he established by forcibly initiating her into his pack yesterday afternoon. The snarl she let out, Kyra right there with her, was loud and aggressive towards him. A clear warning not to touch her, to get away from her. She slammed her elbow right into his chest as hard as she could. He hadn't been expecting it, she realized, when he didn't move out of the way. Heard him gasp, not just in shock, but also in pain. His arm loosened around her and she shot out of the bed and stalked off to the bathroom. Slammed the door so hard that it actually rattled in the frame. How can he even possibly think that things would be okay between them? It was perfectly clear, she'd not wanted to be initiated into his pack. Yet he'd gone ahead and done it anyway. Lucinda was standing in the middle of the bathroom, watching the door. Waiting on him to just try and come in. Waiting, spoiling for a fight, not an argument, an actual physical fight. Stared at the door. Was he too scared? He'd not said a single word. Hadn't even reacted to her sudden attack on him, for that matter. He hadn't liked it yesterday, what was different today? Kyra was even prowling around in her mind right this minute. She'd growled as much as Lucinda had, upon waking to find his voice inside their mind. It took a good 5 minutes, before the door started to open inward. Lucinda snapped her foot out and hit the door with it, with all she had, and it slammed shut. Another deep snarl came from her. He had no idea who he had messed with. He'd not made it into the bathroom, wasn't going to. For although she was spoiling for a fight, Kyra, it seemed, still didn't want to hurt her mate. Why not? Lucinda couldn't understand. He'd hurt her too. Lucinda, please, came down the mind link. His voice was calm and soft. But the sound of his voice, in her mind, only made her blood boil, even more. Get out of my head, she snarled right back. There was silence for a good solid minute. All right, then come out here and talk to me, he said through the door. You want to die? She snarled again. You won't do that, Lucinda. Please come out. Get away from me, she yelled back at him through the door. We're going to have to talk about this, might as well do it now. Screw you. UBD. That's not very nice. Not very nice, she thought. Is he freaking kidding her? Lucinda yanked the door open. Oh, I'm not nice. I understand that you're upset. I get it. No. You don't. Her fists balled at her sides. You know nothing about me. What you did was not nice, yet I'm the one who's not nice. Then tell me. Nick seemed awfully calm to Lucinda. She could see he was watching her every move, and he should be. He was clearly not trying to start the actual fight. She was still itching for. Why would I bother now? You have no respect for me, or what I want. That is not true. But you did leave Pack territory. He was trying to reason with her, she realized. Oh. There would be no reasoning with her. What he had done was brutal, and he had no idea of the consequences for her at all. Get over it. Alpha Corey would not have cared. I'm not Alpha Corey, Lucinda. And I do care. I don't want you putting yourself in harm's way. I couldn't contact you. No one could. Again trying to reason with her. Did he think he could? That he could explain his actions away, that she'd just smile and say, oh, it's okay now? He was dead wrong. I am not some prissy little girl who needs looking after, she yelled at him. Nick just stood there watching her for a moment, then nodded slightly. I understand that. But one thing is all I have asked of you. Why couldn't you just do it? I was freaking bored. So took to training. What's so wrong with that? Look. I understand you're upset. Can we call a truce? We're going around in circles and getting nowhere. A truce, she though. Is he insane or just completely stupid? Why don't you come and train with me and the Pack's warriors this morning? If you're that bored, let's find a way to cure it. A truce? This man was stupid. How would you feel if someone did that to you? Freaking PD off, is how. Okay. I get it, you're PD off. He finally seemed to acknowledge her anger over the situation. Then let's get some of that anger out, via training. Fine. You asked for it, she snapped and stalked off to the walk-in, slammed that door shut behind her. He'd better not try and come in while she was getting dressed. Yanked out a pair of red training tights and a matching gym top. Oh, I'll give you training. Let's just see what you and your men are made of. Lucinda didn't bother with pulling shoes on. If Kyra wanted out during training, Lucinda wouldn't stop her. Today was going to be for him and his men. He'd better stay away from her or she'd have a piece of him too. Didn't bother to brush her messy hair, just twisted it up into a bun on top of her head, then stormed out of the walk-in. Nick was still where she'd left him, standing by the bed, just watching her still in his pajama pants. She turned her angry eyes on him, the full force of her glare shot right at him, then stalked from the room, not waiting for him to change. He could shove it. She hit the stairs with angry footsteps. Came across the Alpha unit walking down the 4th floor hallway and glared right at them too. They were all watching her. Every one of them halted in their tracks, allowed her to stalk by them and continue on down the stairs. She made her way across to the training grounds. There were already people standing around, probably waiting on their Alpha, who'd been held up by her. Tough freaking luck. They were all standing around stretching, several eyes were on her. She'd smell like the pack now. Some would not know who she was and others would likely be able to guess seeing as she was new. One set of eyes, in particular, were staring right at her, that from the other day at breakfast. Clearly still wanted a piece of her. Well, I guess today she could have it. Oh, it's on. Lucinda stood there and sized the woman up. The woman half laughed at her, as she took in her size. I guess she thought she was bigger, therefore stronger, and would win against her. Kyra snarled inside her mind and was now prowling around, itching to have a piece of this woman. She'd been denied it at breakfast, but would not be denied today. Lucinda heard Nick call everyone's attention to him, announced there would be no run this morning, sparring and agility course only. Then called everyone to pair up. Lucinda found that woman right in her face. Oh, she too wanted a fight, it seemed. Well, she was going to get her ass put on the ground. Waited patiently for Nick to call a start to the sparring. The woman launched right at Lucinda as she expected her to. No brains, it seemed, all aggression. Got to fight with your brains, dumbass, she thought, and sidestepped her using Kyra's speed, ducked under the arm that snapped out to grab onto her, and cracked her right in the small of her back with a sharp hard elbow. Caused the woman to cry out in pain. Ha, that would leave a nice bruise. Lucinda turned and looked at her. She was already coming back for her. Furious she'd been bested. Lucinda smirked right at her and then dropped down and swiped out both her legs, stood up as she was falling face first onto the ground and launched herself onto the woman's back, pulled her into a chokehold and squeezed tightly while using Kyra's strength to forcibly hold her down on the ground, a knee to the middle of her back. Heard her gasp for air. Watched as she tried to tap out, but Lucinda and Kyra were going to put this firmly in her place. Or this crap would still go on. Heard Nick yell at her to let go, a warning note in his voice. She waited another 10 seconds, felt the woman really start to struggle and fight to stay conscious, and then and only then, relinquished. Lucinda leaned right down to her ear and whispered deathly quiet to her, "Don't play with things you can't handle," then got up off of the woman and walked away, but not before she saw her look to her Alpha. "Oh yes, help her, Nick. Please give me just one reason." He didn't seem to say anything. Lucinda stalked away and waited for the next round. She hadn't even broken a sweat yet. Barely even raised her heart rate. She was paired up with a male warrior. Kevin walked him right over to her. He was bigger and ready to spar, it seemed. Targeted by Nick, she thought. Yes, send them all over one at a time and I will demolish your men, each and every one of them. You will see. She feinted at him, when the sparring started. Dodged the other way, spun around and hit him with the palm of her hand, using her moment to help with the force of the blow. He was bigger, probably a fierce warrior, but she trained with Thomas and the boys all the time. Could hold her own against any warrior. He was winded but recovered quickly. He stood, a smile on his face, watching her. He'd not expected her to be fast, a lot faster than anyone here would expect. None of them had seen her fight before, would not know her techniques or ability. He lunged at her and Lucinda brought her right foot up to his chest, didn't attempt to dodge him, grabbed onto his shirt and rolled over backwards, using his own momentum against him to flip him over her and onto the ground onto his back with her straddling his waist, let him go and joined her two hands together and slams them down as hard as she could, right into his solar plexus, winding him again. The man was tough, even winded. He was trying to get a hold of her, trying to grab around the waist, but she was tiny, hard to snag, and with little clothing, just her gym top and tiny shorts, there was nothing to grab onto. She deflected his attempts with all the force she could muster, while getting up. He used his wolf speed to get up and snap an arm around her waist from behind. He was really fast, faster than she had expected him to be for such a large man, lifted her up off the ground to lessen any leverage she might have, heard him snort with satisfaction, but if he thought their battle was over, he was wrong. She snapped her head back and headbutt him right in the nose, heard the satisfying sound of if breaking. He dropped her to the ground and she turned to see blood coming from his nose. He had stepped away from her, one hand up as to say stop, I'm done, as the other snapped his nose back into place, before it healed crooked. Even after he fixed his nose, he shook his head when she indicated for another round. Lucinda, that is enough, she heard Nick yell from across the training ground, clearly watching her from wherever he was standing. She honestly didn't care, turned and walked away, to wait for another partner. If any of them were game, that was. She watched as Brady strolled over to her, all casual like, so he'll send his own unit. Well, let's see what they are made of. Hey, why don't you and I give it a go, he offers. Lucinda knew he would train separately with Nick and the Alpha unit. Would be tougher than all the warriors here. A decent fight maybe. But Thomas was a beta and she could bring him down. Brady here was the Delta, 2 ranks below beta. Hope you brought you big boy pants, she snapped at him. Raising both her hands indicating she was ready to go. Let's play, no tap out, she challenged and smirked right at him. He was going down. Nick could send his whole Alpha unit, she would take them all down one at a time. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't step away. She wondered if the response was to the challenge, or to the fact she was to be his future Luna, and she had just stated no stopping, till one of them was unconscious, or in the pack hospital. Brady was quick too. Nearly had her pinned in less than a minute, but she was tiny and fast. Hard to get a hold of. Deflected a blow aimed at her with her forearm and forced it down and away from her. As she struck out at him with her other hand, he managed to avoid the hit but only just. Snapped both his arms up to deflect the roundhouse kick to his left side, swiped her left foot out from under her and she hit the ground, knew he was going to try and pin her, rolled away quick and jumped up before he could. Snapped the palm of her hand into his chest. He hissed at her but wasn't winded. Came for her again, she dodged him, ducking under his arm and snapped a kick into the small of his back. Brady stumbled forward and she was already going after him. When he turned around to size her up again, she was right there in front of him, grabbed his shirt, kneed him right in the groin as soon as she had hold of him. He wasn't expecting it, his cry of pain only made her smile. She used Kyr's strength to kick him in the side and then shove him down onto the ground. He was already recovering and trying to get up, rolled himself over to see where she was, but she was already coming for him. The minute he was on his back, she dropped right on top of him. Her forearms landing right on his neck and she had her knees on his elbows holding him down, using all of Kyr's strength to force him to stay down. Saw his eyes go wide as she pushed hard, placing more pressure on his neck, his airway cut off. He was going to pass out soon and she was going to watch, as he realized she'd beat him and easily so. Heard Nick's furious yelling from somewhere, to her right, for her to let go. She would not. This was what training was for. She watched with satisfaction as Brady's eyes rolled back in his head, then he passed out beneath her. Satisfaction filled her. Felt herself get pulled up and off of him, knew it was Nick, could tell by the way her skin reacted to his, even when PD off the stupid mate bond sent electric tingles through her where he touched her. He was glaring down at her. That is enough from you, he snapped at her, very angry he was. Your attitude is out of control. He turned away from her, to check on his delta. Oh, wrong move, she thought. She snapped the outer edge of her foot right below his kneecap, watched with a angry satisfied smirk, as the man fell to one knee, as it buckled under the pressure and force she had used, his own height and weight going against him, on this occasion. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. She thought happily. Then threw herself onto his back and snapped her arm around his neck, grabbing the wrist with her hand and locking herself into position. A full choke hold to cut off his airway. Wrapped her legs around his abdomen, aiming for just below his rib cage, to hinder his breathing further, by putting as much pressure along his diaphragm. To stop him from trying to take a breath, constricting his breathing with every attempt, squeezing tighter with his every movement. Kyra had receded from the fight. This little showdown was her and Nick, it seemed. Kyra still not willing to hurt her mate. Well, she was. He had hurt her and she would pay him back for it. Bring the big BD down right here, in front of all his warriors. One tiny woman, with sheer determination and will, was all it would take. One person not caring about rank is all it would take, and she was going to be that one person. He'd not forget this in a long time. This was the perfect chance to take him down. It was unlikely she would get another chance. She felt both his hands grab at her arm, but there was not space for him to get his fingers around her to pull them loose, to try and pull himself free. Lucinda tightened her hold, squeezing harder. She knew his airway was constricted, felt him try to take a breath in, and squeezed her thighs tighter around him, causing him even more discomfort. Enough, he shot through the mind link. Oh yes, talk to me through the thing, which is PG me off. Wise choice, she thought. Locked her ankles together when she felt his hand move to her knee to try and remove it. There was no way she was letting go. She would constrict his airway until he was unconscious. See how he like it. Lucinda, I don't want to hurt you. To late you BD, she snarled right down that link. She would be having a piece of him today, and what better way to do it? In front of all his warriors, in front of his alpha unit. One little woman taking down their alpha, not so might now are you, she thought to herself. Lucinda was putting all she had into this battle of theirs, and it appeared no one was going to interfere, not even his own unit. She wondered if they were curious as to the outcome or just weren't willing to get between a Luna and an Alpha. Damn it, Lucinda, she could hear through the link that his voice was strained. He was losing and he knew it. Didn't like that she was showing him up in front of everyone. Well, they would all know, not to mess with her, too. His body suddenly shot up from the ground. He threw himself backwards, slamming her onto the ground, underneath him the full force of his weight on her. Pain shot through her hips and shoulders. She felt the back of her head hit the ground. Splitting pain shot through her head and she gasped in pain, couldn't hold on to him anymore. Her whole body seemed to just go floppy and she had no strength at all. He was gone from her hold, fuzzy around the edges of her mind now. Felt her arms be pinned against her chest and could do nothing about it. Lucinda could barely focus on him at all, knew on some level he was on top of her holding her down, but her eyes were blurry and unfocused. She was weak, didn't seem to be able to move at all. Great, just what she needed, a mild concussion from the blow to the back of her head. She'd had these before, not good. She felt her arms be released after a few seconds and just lay there dazed and unable to do anything but think, no control over her body. He'd won this round, but he would not the next. She was still trying to focus on her surroundings, pull herself together. It took several minutes before she could focus again, and come back completely to her surroundings. Nick was right there, knelt down next to her. She could feel he had a hand on the back of her head, there was another on her neck, his fingers pressed in slightly. He was checking for a wound and monitoring her heart rate. Obviously realized she'd nearly been knocked unconscious by him. Well, it wouldn't be the first time, now would it? Her eyes focused on his face, he was looking right at her. Assessing her, and she knew it. Her hand balled into a fist, and snapped out and punched him right in the mouth. He was completely shocked and rocked back on his feet. Lucinda rolled away from him, pushed herself up off the ground and stood up. Everything spun and she staggered a few steps, her arms snapping out to try and get her balance. Still dizzy, from the blow to the back of her head. Her eyes were on him, as she swayed on her feet, disbelief written all over him at her sudden attack, but what did he expect was going to happen? That she'd roll over and be all happy with him. He was a fool, if he thought that was going to happen. Lucinda watched as he stood up, watched with satisfaction as he touched his thumb to the corner of his mouth, to wipe the blood away. She'd spit his lip, it seemed, there was already dark bruising coming up. He called off the rest of the training and told everyone to leave. No one seemed to argue about it. What were they, a bunch of wimps? This was how you trained, anything less and you weren't prepared for a real fight out there in the real world. Ridiculous. She might need a few more minutes to recover, but she would go again. We're done here, Lucinda, he told her firmly, back to the pack house now. Why, she thought, not willing to go another round and get your ass kicked. I'll be prepared for it now. When she didn't move to leave and she wasn't willing to give up her fight yet. He reached out and grabbed her. Lucinda tried to dodge out of the way, felt sluggish and thought she was going to fall over, affected by her concussion still it seemed. His hand locked around her arm and she was walked back to the pack house by him. Though his strides seemed to match hers, not dragging her today. Nick stopped and looked at her when inside the pack house. Please go and have a shower and calm down. He let go of her arm and moved her off in the direction of the elevator, with a push to the small of her back. She stopped and laughed at him. If that is what you call training, it's inadequate and useless. She shot at him and turned and walked towards the elevator, but she wasn't going to go upstairs and do nothing. Her head had finally cleared from the hit she'd taken. Kyra had fixed her up good and proper, a minor headache was all that was left over and it would pass soon enough. She felt better, no longer dizzy. Watched him as he strode off into his unit, following him. The minute his door was closed she turned and walked away. Headed for the gym, she could do some weight training, run on the treadmill, hit the punching bag and train herself. Then headed for the pool to do some laps. The training around her was not up to her standards, they were a bunch of wimps it seemed, didn't really train, just muck about, and for a short period of time too it seemed. What a joke! She had trained harder than this, even before she had Kyra. 33. Nick POV. The savage attack on his body had shocked him completely. He'd known Lucinda was going to be upset with him. Angry even, but a physical attack to his body, he had not been expecting at all. That snarl that had come from her, was both her and Kyra, that much was clear. He'd angered both of them it seemed. Nick had let go instantly. Prepared himself to have a full-blown fight, right here in their bed. That snarl had spoke volumes to him and his wolf. Rip was furious, not on the attack of his body, but that Nick had hurt them, and now they didn't want anything to do with him. He was furious. Kyra was also pulling away now. When she'd purred at him before, now she was a ball of fury. There had been no further attack on him, she had launched herself out of their bed with all of her wolf speed and stalked into their bathroom. The waves of anger coming off of her were easily felt by him and his wolf, and slammed the door behind her. His eyes had been on her the whole time, waiting for the sudden attack he thought was coming. A part of him had thought the door was going to break. It had been a vicious slam that had rattled the door frame, not unlike him when he was angered and needed to take it out on something. Slamming a door was good therapy. Rip was snarling inside his mind, fix it. Now he was mad at Nick and wanted his mate placated and calm. We've seen fury, I don't want her mad at us like that. Nick sighed. They had indeed seen Kyra furiously mad. It wasn't something even he wanted to come up against. Felt sure Rip wouldn't hurt his mate, even if she was trying to hurt them, and tearing into them in full wolf mode. He sat up on the side of the bed, rubbed his hand over his face and through his hair, which brought a slight pain to his chest. When he looked down, there was a bruise appearing where she'd attacked him. Seems Rip was not going to heal him. You deserved it, his wolf growled at him. There was not much he could do about it. As for his current situation, he could apologize to her, but that was about it. What was done was done. He couldn't take it back. He didn't want to apologize either. She had been reckless yesterday and he'd told her as much. His eyes were on the bathroom door. She had not turned on the shower. Had gone in there to get away from him, it seemed, nothing more. Nick gave her a few minutes to try and calm herself down, then got up. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door. Only to have it forcibly slam shut in his face. He'd not been expecting that either, had stumbled back a step and stared at it. He sighed and shook his head. Okay, that's not going to happen. Tried the mind link, Lucinda, please. He kept his tone light and calm. Needed her to be calm or to calm down. The snarl that had come back at him had been instant. Get out of my head, told him she was not even close to calming down. Neither, it appeared, was her wolf. It was using the link he'd established yesterday, that was making her mad, right this minute. Or at least using it. Alright, so let's not use it for now. Alright, then come out here and talk to me, he asked of her. You want to die? She snarled back at him, through the closed door. Not a question, a clear statement. You won't do that, Lucinda, please come out. Nick didn't honestly think she would either. They were mates, albeit not getting along, but still, if she physically hurt him, it would hurt her as well. She was just really mad about yesterday and how he'd forced her hand, was all. Just needed to talk it out and adjust to it. It would pass given time. Get away from me, she'd yelled right back. It seemed this probably wasn't a good time, but he couldn't just let it fester. That could make it worse, and not only would Rip not stand for it, Nick didn't want her throwing around a formal rejection either. Had to clear it up, and quickly. It was normal to be initiated into your mate's pack. It was expected, actually. He couldn't understand why she was so very angry about it. This might take longer than he thought to blow over, but he was going to work on it, work on her. Asking her to come out and talk about it didn't go down so well either. Screw you. UBD. Nick couldn't help it when his mouth twitched for a second, amused by her word choice. He shook his head. Now was not the time to try and play intimate word games with her. Though the image it shot into his mind was nice. When he'd told her that wasn't very nice. The door had been yanked open and she stood glaring up at him. Told him I'm not nice. Nick knew exactly what she was implying and referring to. How could he not? Tried to placate her and let her know that he understood, that she was mad and upset, only to watch as more anger appeared to roll off of her. She wasn't even at her anger threshold, he realized. This was probably just the tip of the iceberg. No wonder Alpha Corey and his unit were betting on him not being able to handle her. He'd probably bitten off more than he could chew, he now realized. Her claim that he knew nothing about her, was not something he could refute. She had not let him in at all, or told him anything much about herself. Then tell me, he'd suggested calmly. He did want to know everything. Especially about her previous mate. She'd brought him up only once, and to point out to him that they were two very different people. That her previous mate was kinder than Nick was. She had made a very loud statement about it. That much so, he had gotten the gist of, probably not a good idea to bring the man up now then. Claiming that he had no respect for her irked him a lot. If only she knew. But trying to explain it to her right now, was not going to happen, probably use it against him, in her current mood. For another time. Again trying to placate her and get her to calm down, even a little, was not working at all, even when he'd told her. He cared about her and didn't want her to get hurt. Which was the truth, didn't seem to matter to her at all. She was way too angry to sit and talk this out. The only other thing he could think of was to give her a way to get her anger out. So offered her to train with him and his warriors this morning. Alpha Corey had said she trained hard to fit in, so perhaps getting some of that anger out was a good idea. He'd also get to see how she fought hand to hand. Might come in handy at some point. Lucinda had no qualms in hitting him with her bow yesterday. Today it seemed she wanted an all-out fight with him. He'd picked up on that quickly. Though why she actually hadn't launched herself at him yet, was still unclear. Probably their mate bond was saving his ass from a beating right now. Nick had made sure to keep himself in check this whole time, not allowing her attitude and yelling and screaming at him to incite him to start the fight with her. He didn't want to hurt her, he also didn't want to give her an excuse to reject him. Just wanted her to calm down, so she could find the words to explain to him why she was so utterly pissed off at him. Fine, you asked for it, had come out of her mouth, and Nick actually bit his lip and wondered if maybe this was a very bad idea. But she was at least moving, and had agreed. A start, he thought. Fix it now. Rip snarled aggressively at him again. I'm working on it, he shot back, annoyed. They should be on the same page. Not arguing with each other. She came out of the walk-in all dressed in red gym clothes. A tiny pair of tight-fitting shorts that barely covered her backside and a gym top that left little to the imagination. Goddess, she really was out to punish him. He watched her stalk right out of the room. Did the woman ever just stroll? He didn't think so. When he thought about it, most of the time, even in her pack and here, she'd stalked about, angry little critter, he thought absently. And shook his head. He ran both hands over his face. This was probably not going to go well. He didn't stop her, let her go. She knew where the training ground was. He did note that she hadn't put on any shoes, that was odd. He'd forego the morning run on that account, didn't want her getting her feet hurt or cut up on the running trail through the woods. It was a 5K trail, too much for barefooted running. Found his alpha unit all waiting on him, the looks on their faces said it all. They'd already seen her this morning and the anger pouring off of her. He didn't say anything and neither did they. Not even Jeremy for once, which was very odd. The man thought it was hilarious that she was so resistant to him. The man appeared to have been rendered silent or just knew this was not the time for a joke. Nick didn't know with him, but was glad he kept his mouth shut. The minute he walked into the training grounds he could see Valerie and Lucinda sizing each other up. Valerie had been warned the other day, but it appeared she didn't care. He'd have to keep an eye on her. She knew the #1 rule around here. Not to mess with another wolf's bonded mate, and even though he and Lucinda were not marked or mated, at this point, Could be a while yet, it seemed. He had announced her as his mate and the future Luna to his pack. Not to mention she was also sleeping in his suite. Nothing any other woman had ever gotten to do. Valerie should know better. Both spoiling for a fight. Jeremy indicated the two of them. I can see that he was well aware of where Lucinda was, and her mood at present. It didn't help, that the moment he told them all to pair up, Valerie practically ran over there to Lucinda and got right in her face. He frowned, not happy about that. If she did best the future Luna, he could just imagine the fallout, considering Lucinda had guessed correctly about him and Valerie once partners. Though she wasn't his latest. That woman didn't seem to care about him finding his mate, at all. Had simply smiled at him and actually congratulated him, when walking past him the other day. He'd thanked her. Where Valerie's jealousy came from he didn't know. They hadn't had sex in over a year. That it had appeared he was on Valerie's side, of the tension, that had gone on between the two of them, in the dining room that day and not on Lucinda's. An error on his part. Especially when Jeremy had to point out, that Lucinda and Kyra were simply displaying jealousy and possessiveness over him. Something he'd liked the idea of, when he'd had a chance to think about it. Showed their bond was there and affecting her, even if she weren't willing to admit it yet. Even now, as mad as she was at him, he'd watched her size up Valerie, wanting a piece of the woman. Somewhere inside of her, under all that anger, she could still get jealous about him. He started the training. Watched as Lucinda sidestepped and cracked an elbow into Valerie's back. Ouch, he knew firsthand how much that hurt. Swiped her legs out from under her and was on her so fast it astounded him. A low whistle came from Jeremy, who was also watching, it seemed. Valerie was in a chokehold and he watched as she tried to tap out, as Lucinda refused to acknowledge it. Obvious to him she was putting the woman in her place. Nick sighed, she wasn't going to let go until Valerie was out cold, it seemed. Lucinda, let go now, he yelled across to her. Watched her and thought he was going to have to go and intervene, but she did let go, saw her lean down and say something to the woman. Strained to hear it over the other warriors sparring, and taunting each other. Did not manage to pick it up though. She got up and walked away from the woman, not interested in a rematch. Valerie, however, looked right at him, pouted and looked like she was upset. Trying to get him to sympathize with her. He was not that gullible. Valerie was a good fighter and she had just met her match, and by a tiny she-wolf at that. Probably irritated her. You challenged her, he shot down the link. I tapped out, though Nick, she sounded teary. I guess, your Luna is putting you in your place after breakfast the other day. Go and find another partner. He dismissed her and turned to Kevin. Go find Lucinda a better partner. Nick watched as Kevin walked Samson over, a rather large man, a high-ranking warrior, as she was. This should be a good match to watch. He took a step back to watch it, waving Jeremy to take over training. Jeremy called for Brady to take over. When Nick looked at him, Jeremy smiled. Oh, I ain't missing today's fights, boss. Nick just shook his head. Jeremy was in all likelihood watching everything she did, assessing her every move, trying to figure out her weaknesses. It was what he did. Nick watched as she winded the man, then flip him over, right over the top of herself. He was nearly twice her size, definitely weighed double or more than what she was. Used his own momentum against him. Even Samson looked a little shocked. She shot up and slammed her conjoined hands into his chest. Nick frowned when he saw Kyra push forward to assist with the fight. Not something he approved of in hand-to-hand combat training. When she broke his nose with the force of that headbutt, Samson let her go. He wasn't prepared to fight a wolf-enhanced she-wolf during training. That was not how it was done here. Nick would have to have a word with her about it. He watched as Samson cracked his nose back into place, before his wolf heeled it crooked. Lucinda, that is enough, he called out to her again. Her attitude was still on the angry side, it seemed. I'll go, boss. Brady offered up. Watch yourself. She's itching for fight after fight, it seems. I'm strong and quick, and I've been watching her the whole time. Nick stepped closer to them, as did Jeremy, who waved Kevin to take over training. Might have to get involved at some point, he mentioned down the link. All casual like. He had a feeling Jeremy was right. Lucinda was still winding up. When he heard her taunt Brady and then say no, tap out, he shot Brady a reminder, watch yourself. Lucinda took to Brady as she had Samson. But the girl fought dirty, when she realized Brady was just as quick and tough as she was. Kneed him right in the balls. Hard at that, by the sound of pain that escaped him, he actually dropped down onto his knees, though that didn't stop Lucinda at all. She kicked him and shoved him over, not even caring that their fight was completely over. Dropped all her weight down on his elbows with her knees pinning him to the ground, and shoved her forearms to his throat. Nick saw Kyra once again push forward to assist with the fight. Is this how she trained, her and Kyra always together? He was more than annoyed by her behavior now. Yelled her name and told her to get up. She did not, however, stop, and he watched as he stalked over to her, as Brady passed out completely. Everyone on the training ground stopped, the minute he'd yelled out in anger at her, to see what was going on. He grabbed her by both arms and pulled her up off of Brady to glare down at her as she stood in front of him. She needed to know she'd gone too far. That is enough from you, he yelled at her. Your attitude is out of control. He realized the second he'd said it. Alpha Corey had used that phrase about Kyra. She was glaring right back at him. The woman had just taken down 3 people and, it seemed, was still spoiling for a fight. He would have to deal with her later. Nick POV, he turned to check on the unconscious Brady, only to feel the side of her foot connect with his right knee, the full force of her weight behind it. His leg buckled and he fell down onto one knee. She'd done this to him yesterday, lucky it was the other knee, might have dislocated it otherwise. It was actually still paining him a bit, rip not healing him, where his mate was hurting him, it seemed. The second he was down on his knee, she was on his back. Had him in a full choke hold. Her legs were completely around his waist, squeezing hard to keep her position good and firm. Nick felt his airway constricted by her choke hold. Felt Rip depart to the back of his mind and lay down, not willing to assist anyway. Your fight, he'd heard him mutter. He reached up with both hands, to try and loosen her grip on him, felt her arms tighten even more. He couldn't get his large hands in between her arm and his neck to create room for air to his lungs. She was not going to let go. He moved a hand to her knee to try and force it away. Only to feel her lock her ankles together, and then she tightened her thighs around him the moment he tried to suck in breath. She clamped tight so he wouldn't be able to breath out. Woman was like a boa constrictor, hindering every effort to breath he made. She had been spoiling for this fight, with him since the minute she had woken up, and was now getting it. Enough, he shot through the mind link. He knew she would be annoyed by his use of it, seeing as it was the source of her anger. She didn't even respond to him. Wanted this showdown, that much was crystal clear. Lucinda, I don't want to hurt you, he told her, and he did not want to, but she was suffocating him, and in front of all of his warriors. They knew she was their future Luna as well. He was completely in 2 minds as to what to do. Pass out and be humiliated by her, or take control of the situation and possibly hurt her. Rip was against hurting her, but he too was a proud creature himself and was no longer laying down. It might be Nick against Lucinda here, but Rip would intervene it seemed, if necessary, and it was looking like it was going to be. "Too late UBD," she snarled down the link and her grip tightened even further. This was a fight she was not willing to put an end to, until he was down and out or she was. It was either him or her. "Damn it, Lucinda," he shot down the link. It was his last warning. When she didn't let up, he forced himself up onto his feet and slammed himself down backwards to drop her underneath him. He was much bigger than she was and much heavier. He'd had to push hard with all his strength. That knee she'd capped was causing him actual pain, and trying to get up on it hurt. She might be tiny, but she is strong. He didn't even sense Kyra. It was likely her wolf had opted out of their showdown, just as his had. Nick heard her gasp in pain, and although she didn't let go, everything loosened around him, her legs and her arms. He dragged in a desperately needed lungful of air, as he pulled her arm from his neck and rolled himself over to glare down at her. Grabbed both her arms and pinned them across her chest, so she couldn't get a hold of him again. He registered the glazed-over look. She couldn't focus at all. Damn it! Had likely hit her head and was concussed. By him, this wasn't going to go down well, just another reason for her to be annoyed or angry with him. But she had started this battle. Hit her head pretty good, Boss Jeremy shot down the link. Nick's hands let go of her arms. She was of no threat to him right this minute. Slipped one hand under her head carefully, and he prayed she wasn't really injured, that he hadn't caused her to have an actual, bloodied head wound. His fingers stayed dry, there was no blood. He felt Rip push forward to smell her. He couldn't scent blood either, thank the goddess. Who knows what kind of rage that would set off in his beast. There was however a small lump formed on the back of her head, where she had connected the ground, so definitely a concussion. She was just laying there all floppy underneath him. Her legs had fallen away from him now too, no muscle tone left in her, due to nearly being rendered unconscious. He got up off of her and knelt down beside her, shifted her legs closed, not a position he wanted anyone watching to see her in, all splayed out like that. Though not completely unconscious, she was still clearly having trouble functioning, focusing, and regaining her full capacity. His touched her throat with his fingers, feeling for her pulse, watched her as she just lay there blinking, slowly, a slight frown on her face, trying to regain her focus. It shouldn't take long, Kyra would be helping her with healing. He just had to wait it out. So did she. Might have to have a pack doctor take a look at her, if she didn't recover soon. Though her breathing was steady and her heart rate was good and strong. He didn't like it. What had it been, a minute, 2 minutes, and she was still unfocused? He let out an explosive breath. He'd not known he was holding the moment he watched her eyes finally refocus on him. Thank the goddess. 3 minutes, boss. Jeremy informed him. Trust the man to be timing it any longer, and he was getting the pack doctor. Her fist connecting with the side of his face a few seconds after she regained her senses, was so hard and unexpected that it rocked him backwards. Nick, tasted blood instantly. Was hard-pressed not to yell at her. Watched her roll away from him and try to get up to her feet. Took her a good 10 seconds, though standing, still appeared to be hard for her to do. She staggered about for a bit, arms up and out to keep her balance. Once she got it, thought they retracted and moved into a fighting position. She appeared ready to go another round, it seemed. Was she completely crazy? She was obviously still concussed, swaying a little on her feet. But still spoiling for a fight. He stood and wiped the blood from his split lip. Flicked it at the ground. It was no wonder they were all placing bets on her, taking a piece of him, back in her pack. The woman didn't seem to know when to quit. She was also more than capable, it seemed as well. Nick had enough. Training is over, he snapped out, and everyone started filing away. No one was going to argue about it, not after what they had just seen. Their future Luna nearly take down their alpha. He was more than angry about it himself. When she continued to just stand there and stare him down, he knew she was not done. Anyone still watching knew it too. His whole unit, and the exiting warriors, what they would make of the fight they'd just seen, he couldn't tell. He hadn't marked or mated her, and that was something that was done very quickly, under normal circumstances. She did not eat with him, actually they'd not been seen together at all, other than the day he'd announced her. This little display of hers could well show his pack, she was not interested in being their Luna. He didn't like it at all. He knew he was responsible for her anger right now. He wanted his pack to know he was not trying to force her hand, like his brothers and his father before him, but right this minute, he had no idea what those warriors were thinking. Might very well be thinking, he was just like them. He saw Brady move in his peripheral vision, and be helped up by Kevin. "We're done here, Lucinda," he stated flatly, making sure she understood it was over, there would be no more fighting. Back to the pack house. Stubborn woman, continued to stand there and stare him down. He reached out and grabbed her, her reflexes were still sluggish and slower than she expected, he imagined. Still affected by her concussion. He locked a hand around her and led her back to the pack house. She didn't seem to dig her heels in, or resist. Nick made a conscious effort to walk at her pace, due to her current condition. Stopped outside of his office, not exactly certain what to do with her right this minute, looked down at her. Wanted to chastise her, but seeing as the reason behind her behavior was actually his fault and he knew it, opted not to. "Please, go and have a shower and calm down," he said, and gently pushed her towards the elevator. To his dismay she stopped, looked at him and laughed, a mirthless laugh if that is what you call training. "It's inadequate and useless." Nick was completely speechless. The training they would normally have completed this morning would certainly not have been inadequate, or useless. It was she herself, her current attitude and wanting to harm anyone and everyone who paired up with her. Had him calling it off, for safety reasons. He didn't need her putting his warriors. Her warriors, in the pack hospital, all because she was angry with him. He just turned away from her and walked into his office. He was not going to let her antagonize him into another fight, which it looked like she was trying to do. He was more than a little disappointed in her right this minute. She should not be taking her anger at him out on the pack members. He was going to have to sit her down and talk to her about this. That chat list was getting longer by the minute. Did she not know that the pack members would look up to her? No, he thought, she would know. Came from a pack with a Luna, who held full authority. It appeared to him that her anger had outweighed her own common sense today. With any luck she would go have a hot shower and calm down. Then they could sit down, quietly, in private and discuss what happened today. 34. Nick POV. He was annoyed all morning by her behavior. Brady hadn't taken it personally, he thought she had fought well, caught him off guard and was mean. Which according to him was always a good thing in a real fight. His bruising had been healed by his wolf, who also wasn't looking for retribution apparently. Trains like she's in a real fight, he'd shrugged it off. The man didn't seem to feel humiliated in the least bit. There had been a nice bruise on Nick's neck for most of the morning, which he'd finally managed to talk Rip into clearing up for him. Nick felt a little bit humiliated, his pride had taken a hit. It had been a long time since anyone had brought him down and so close to passing out like she had. When he trained with just his unit, it was only Jeremy who could take him down one-on-one, which didn't surprise him. The man was observant and learned people's weaknesses. He wondered what he'd gleaned from Lucinda today. Nick was actually really proud of Lucinda's fighting skills. He had never wanted a useless Luna. He certainly had gotten one that was more than capable. But she was indeed hard to handle. Unpredictable, and it seemed used to doing what she wanted. Alpha Corey had clearly been lenient with her, on more than one occasion it seemed. He'd left her alone for the entirety of the morning. She had not attended breakfast in the packhouse dining room. Probably ate in their suite, now that she had a fully stocked kitchen. It was now lunchtime and she was not here again. He needed the pack to start seeing them together. Wolves were also naturally social creatures. He was surprised that she spent so much time alone. He sighed and tugged on the link that was her thread in his mind. Close by, so in the packhouse somewhere. A relief. Where are you? He asked, trying to sound casual. It was instantly severed, still not willing to talk to him it seemed. He got up from the table and headed for his suite without a word. He felt Jeremy, Kevin, and Brady's eyes on him. Ignored it. Not in the suite, couldn't even send her, so hadn't been here for a long time. Lucinda, please. Where are you? He tried again, only to have it severed yet again. He closed his eyes and counted to 10, was she trying to test his patience? Rip, go find your mate. He knew it was something Rip would do without hesitation, even if he was still annoyed with Nick. His mate was important to him and he would want to know where she was, not to mention want to see her. Rip pushed forward without a word and he tracked her lingering scent, something much easier for his wolf to catch when old and stale. It didn't take long, 5 minutes of walking about. She was in the pool swimming laps. Rip receded the minute he recognized her. Nick frowned. Her strokes looked slow and she looked like she was tired to him, struggling in fact. He walked over to her lane and watched as she got closer, noted the red of her outfit. Oh no! She didn't come here directly after training, she'd had a concussion to recover from, and he had sent her upstairs to shower and calm down. It looked like she had outright ignored him, and gone off to do her own thing. He glanced at his watch, it was just after 12, and he'd sent her upstairs just before 7 this morning. That was a good 5 hours. His eyes turned to the lifeguard. How long has she been here? About 2 hours, boss. Getting slower by the minute, but won't stop it seems. I did try. Was told to shove it. Just great, he thought to himself. No breakfast and she'd been out cold for dinner last night as well. At the rate she was going, she would waste away to nothing. That would not go over with their new mother, Lindy. How was Kyra allowing this? Surely she could have taken over and forced her to stop by now. Nick waited for her to touch the wall, and reached down and grabbed her by the armpits before she could turn for the next lap, lifted her up and out of the water, put her feet down on the ground before him. Her eyes lifted to his and still there, in them, was anger. I don't want to talk to you, she snapped up at him. Fine, he simply nodded. Then picked her up and tossed her over his shoulder and walked out of the pool area. He was a little surprised that she didn't hit him or resist at all, just dangled upside down. Perhaps she had learned from yesterday there was no point in arguing with him, that he would only put her down when he was ready to. He walked all the way to the elevator and waited for it. He didn't care who saw them at this point. She wasn't fighting him at all, so it wouldn't look that bad. He'd seen Kevin carry his mate around when he couldn't cajole her into compliance, perhaps it would look normal. Actually, Kevin's mate often propped her face on a hand that was propped against Kevin's back, made herself comfortable mostly. Nick thought with a half smile. That man may be able to charm any she-wolf but not his mate. They had all seen him try, only to have her stand there defiantly with her hands on her hips and state, "Don't you dare try that crap, I'm immune to your charm," which it seemed she was, the only one probably. Only ever seen him do it once. The only other time he'd seen Kevin use his gamma charm was on Lucinda, and it had worked a treat. Even Kevin had enjoyed it. Nick carried her all the way into their suite, didn't say a word to her. If she didn't want to talk, then that was fine. Keyed into their suite and walked her right into the bathroom, put her down gently on the closed toilet seat lid. She didn't move, just glared up at him. "If you're going to eat nothing and train yourself for endless hours, there will be no training at all," he said simply. "You can't stop me," she shot right back. "I can actually," he replied. "As for your actions this morning, attacking pack members, when you're angry with me, taking it out on them, I am disappointed that you would do that. I thought you as the Luna would know better. Unfortunately I will, as the alpha of this pack, have to punish you. I do not want to, I do realize it's me you're mad at, and why, there will be no shifting unless I am with you, till further notice. This is because KYRA play a part in attacking pack members, we don't use wolf strength in hand-to-hand training." He stood watching her. She just sat there, said nothing for a full minute, so he stepped out of the bathroom and headed downstairs for lunch. It was not a nice thing to have to lay out a punishment for her, his mate and the pack's Luna. But he could not, would not, stand for her hurting pack members in his stead. "I'm not like you or your slack warriors, who only train 2 hours a day." Her voice came down the mind link. At least she was using it, he thought, of her own free will. "I have always trained 6 hours a day, sometimes more. That was in your old pack. Here will be different. Till further notice, Lucinda. There will be no training. Until I know you will not hurt other pack members." When after a minute passed and he got no reply, but could still feel the link was connected. "You do understand you were in the wrong this morning, don't you? During training." It took another full minute, but she finally replied, "Yes." "Good," he said softly. "Please eat something." He closed out the link. A little progress was better than none. It seemed his calmly spoken admonishment of her behavior and the careful way he'd worded it had sunk in. He had spent the entire morning trying to figure out what to say to her and how to deliver it. Training 6 hours a day was too excessive. He would have to get to the bottom of that. Why on earth she felt she had to train that hard? There had to be a reason, he had to know what it was. Had something happened to her when she was younger? When wolfless and she'd been unable to defend herself? That scar on her inner thigh popped right into his mind. It was very high up. Had she trained long and hard afterwards to make sure it would never happen again? It was a possibility. But not knowing her history and her not willing to talk about it either, made things more difficult. He glanced around the dining room. He had to get her to make some friends, he thought absently. It couldn't be good for her to be alone all the time. He was going to have to try and sort that out. Though any of the she-wolves he'd bedded prior to meeting her were likely going to have to stay away, and unfortunately there were quite a few of those running around the pack. "That's why we wait for mate." Rip had snorted. Probably the very reason some waited. He now realized. His eyes fell on Kevin, who was actually looking right at him. "What? Curious about your thoughts, boss, you look pensive. Any chance you could introduce your mate to Lucinda? I think she needs to make a few friends." "Sure thing. When she calms down though." Nick nodded. "Fair enough." Lucinda was asleep on the couch in the living room when he turned in for the night. "Not going to happen, my dear," he thought. She'd made herself comfortable, a pillow and a blanket, all snuggled up. He shook his head. Showered, changed, the bed was already turned down, which meant Samantha had been here. Probably where Lucinda had gotten that blank from. Nick walked out to the living room, and scooped her up. She didn't even wake up to his complete surprise, walked back to their bedroom and put her in the middle of their bed. Likely she was actually exhausted from all her training and nothing to eat. As angry as she was, he was not letting her sleep alone and put distance between them. He was not sleeping alone either. He did not want to. Didn't think he'd be able to fall asleep knowing she was out there and he in here in their bed. Lucinda could pummel him in the morning if she liked. But he wanted her next to him, always. Even if she was angry with him. The rest of the audiobook will be continued in the next episode. Join us on Patreon for early access or more great audiobooks. A link is provided in the video description.